Okay, so happening right now, we have Columbus Mayor Andrew Ginther in the NBC4 newsroom. We got him live for you.
That's right. Colleen Marshall joins us now to start off this conversation. Colleen, Darlene and I will be right here. We will be taking part in this conversation with you.
And it is an important conversation because the mayor has made some statements today that he is not happy with what happened last week when the U.S. Marshal made statements at the shooting site. Moments after, or at least within the hour of the shooting death of Casey Goodson, in which he said he believed that Deputy Meade would be investigated and ultimately cleared because it appeared to be a justifiable shooting. You are angry about that. Tell us why.
Well, he wasn't authorized to speak on behalf of the investigation. And he didn't have any of the information because the investigation hadn't started. And it was inappropriate, unacceptable. And it undermined the credibility of the investigation, its independence, transparency with the community. And that's unacceptable.
I have to tell you that when I heard the statement, initially what goes through your mind is, well, they must have pretty good evidence that this young man was in the wrong and that the deputy was in the right. Do you think that's the impression he was trying to give the public? And is that what you're concerned about, that he was laying the groundwork for this investigation to go a certain way?
Well, that wasn't his role to play. And it's inappropriate to have folks trying to influence an investigation. It undermines the community's trust and credibility that this investigation was going to be thorough, accurate, and fair. And there are many folks in the community who have heard this before from folks that are trying to influence investigations involving police-involved shootings and wrongdoing. And it's important. If we're asking the community to be patient and to wait until the investigation is complete, and that we're going to take wherever the facts and truth take us, the least we should expect from our law enforcement professionals is to do the same.
Mayor, you came out earlier today, as Colleen just said. You were blasting the U.S. Marshal for doing so. Who did you want to send a stronger message to? Casey Goodson's family or the community? A community who is already not trusting of any law enforcement here in Central Ohio?
Well, I think it's critically important that we all commit to allowing for this investigation to be complete, accurate, and finding, justice for everyone involved. We owe that to the Goodson family. We owe that to the collective community. And if we believe that truth and justice is most important, we have to expect everyone to have the patience to make sure that this investigation, and that's why that I brought in the U.S. Attorney and the DOJ and the FBI to make sure that the civil rights investigation was concurrent with the investigation that's being completed by the Columbus Division of Police. It's important for independence, transparency, and accountability that we make sure that truth and justice is served.
Mayor Ginther, I didn't hear you mention the BCI when you just ran through those agencies. It took 3 days for the Columbus Police Department to reach out to the BCI to ask the agency to investigate this case, and then we learned that it said it would not investigate because so much time had passed and it was an issue of looking at evidence and so forth. So how can you assure people in Central Ohio that this process is moving smoothly?
Well, as I shared earlier this summer, we entered into an MOU with BCI that every death in custody and police-involved shooting that takes place with the Columbus Division of Police will automatically be referred to BCI for an additional level of independence with respect to the investigation. That didn't necessarily cover other deaths in our jurisdiction. Obviously, this was a deputy sheriff and was not Columbus Division of Police officers. What I want to be clear about, as long as I'm mayor, any death in custody or law enforcement involved shooting that takes place in the city of Columbus will be referred to BCI for an independent investigation.
Mr. Mayor, if I could take you back to that day, the day of the shooting. At some point, someone had to get in touch with you and let you know what was going on, because all of a sudden your police force was involved in investigating a law enforcement officer in a fatal shooting, and once again, it was a young black man. So what were you told about the investigation? And we know that the U.S. Marshal was trying to imply to the public that this appeared to be justified. Were you told it appeared to be justified? And at that point, what was your first move of action?
Absolutely critical to me, and this is why we entered into the MOU and changed our policies and procedures earlier this year to enter into an MOU with BCI to make sure that anything involving the Division of Police, I believe that that was the course of action we were going to follow with this investigation. Columbus Division of Police started the investigation. I immediately asked whether or not BCI would take the case over. I have complete trust and confidence in the investigation the Division of Police would conduct. These are professional investigators. But for the community to have that additional level of independence, not CPD, not the Deputy Sheriff's Office, but BCI conducting the investigation. But ultimately, as you know, BCI initially agreed to it, but then was overruled by the Attorney General and told that they would not complete the investigation.
But again, were you given the impression that this was a justified shooting? What kinds of details
only
were they giving you?
Yeah, only based on what I read in the press from the U.S. Marshal, which again was inaccurate, incomplete, and wrong for anyone to try to influence this investigation.
Mayor Ginther, I don't want us to miss the point here and part of the focus. We have a family right now without their 23-year-old son, and this situation playing out in our community. And this was a different agency. It was not a city agency involved. I sat down with Tamala Payne just the other day. I don't know if you saw that interview, whether you did or didn't. I want to read you a couple of quotes. She says she has mixed emotions. She wants justice. She wants murder charges. I definitely want that man to go to jail. I can't hug my son. Even if he goes to jail for life, he will still have the opportunity to hug his kids. Have you been in touch with her family? What have you been telling them?
You know, we grieve as a community. I mean, I'm not just a mayor, I'm a dad. And the thought of losing a child like this in a way that there was so much that this young person had in front of him. Casey had such an incredibly bright future, a good kid who had worked hard and done everything the right way. And to have his life snatched from him in this way has got to be just devastating for Mrs. Payne and the Goodson family. We are in process of reaching out to them to offer our comfort, our support, our condolences, but also services for the rest of that family. I know there's a lot of folks offering to support them right now, but as you know, with grief, it doesn't go away in just a few days or a week or a month, and we need to be there to support this family into the future. You know, Columbus has lost one of our sons. This didn't happen in some other place, in some other city across the country. It happened right here in our home.
Mayor Ginther, it's been a week since this incident took place, and I am just trying to understand. I'm not an elected official. There are some things I just don't get here. How have you not been able to get in touch with the family?
We're in process of doing that, and we'll be reaching out to make direct contact to offer those support and services. What was really important initially is to make sure that the family was ready to hear from me. This is not my place to insert myself into a grieving family situation. And so what our folks have been doing is communicating with them, their spiritual and faith advisors, to make sure that we do it in a constructive way that is comforting and supporting to this family, not for political expediency.
We know that.
And Mayor Ginther, let me ask you this then. Let's talk about the protest happening in about 30 minutes, about 40 minutes, right downtown, right there at the State House. Another one planned for tomorrow. What is it that you want people to know? Because even the NAACP, as well as a number of fraternities and sorority members here in Central Ohio, they're calling for calmness. They're calling for peace.
The family's calling for peace.
The family is even calling for peace.
Yeah, I think we need to listen to this mother who's grieving, in this community that's grieving. Casey Goodson was a man of peace, and anything to be done to demand truth and justice in his name ought to be done peacefully. But we encourage people to come down and use their voices to demand change, reform, and justice. And we want to make sure those protesters are safe, that our officers are safe, that everybody in our community is safe. But this is an important part of this community that is grieving right now and demanding justice and reform at the same time.
I know Colleen is going to hop in here in just a quick second, but I do want to mention that I did reach out this afternoon to Attorney Sean Walton, who is representing the family. I told him you would be coming here. I told him about your statements. I asked if Attorney Walton, do you have any comments, a response to this and the action taken? He says, Carrie, I'm focused on the family tonight. They are heading, planning possibly to be at the rally tonight. We know other leaders, they want to be there tonight. He says, we will let these leaders hash this out for now, and we will respond when appropriate. Colleen.
We have had trouble getting information from the FOP, some back and forth going on. Have you been in contact with the FOP, and what are you hearing from officers? You've had a contentious relationship with them, partly because of your effort to have this community oversight committee. You don't have that committee in place yet, but what are you hearing from the FOP and this committee that you're putting together? Are you consulting with any of those advisors yet to see what they believe your next steps should be?
Well, as you know, the people of Columbus have spoken, and they spoke loud and clear about the change and reform they want to see take place in this community. 75% of the voters supported the creation of the Civilian Review Board and the Inspector General. The working group that has been looking at best practices around the country and what would work best here in the city have just finalized their recommendations and are going to be issuing a report in the coming weeks. I will be working with Council President Hardin and City Council to stand up that Civilian Review Board, ask for applications from the community, and work with them to make sure that we get the very best Inspector General we can to help move this forward. As you know, we're entering into negotiations with the FOP, and this is our top priority, to make sure that we have a Civilian Review Board with subpoena power to deal with issues of police misconduct.
I want to pick up with something you mentioned earlier. You said that it seemed to be your understanding, you knew you had the agreement for BCI to step in anytime a city police officer was involved. This was a case involving a deputy being investigated, and you seemed to hint that you assumed the BCI would be brought in. They weren't brought in. So who dropped the ball? Did you assume that somebody within your department would do that? Did you assume that BCI would step forward because they knew they had this agreement with the city? Instead, 3 days go by and then Attorney General says, nope, this is a muddied investigation at this point.
Yeah, I think, you know, clearly when we entered into the MOU with BCI earlier this year, my understanding was that any death in custody police-involved shooting that took place in the community would be referred to BCI. Our agreement, our MOU, only pertained to the Columbus Division of Police. So obviously, you know, deputy sheriff, a different law enforcement agency, but I've made it clear that moving ahead and into the future, regardless of the agency, if a police-involved shooting death in custody situation takes place in the city limits, it will go to BCI, period.
Are you concerned that there could be different conclusions about how this unfolded by the investigators from the FBI and the city investigators, or are they working in concert?
Well, they're concurrent investigations. The FBI and DOJ are looking into any potential civil rights violations, and obviously CPD is doing the investigation of the shooting and whether or not policies, procedures were followed, and whether or not any criminal activity took place. And those investigations, the Division of Police will be referred to the Franklin County prosecutor, and obviously the FBI DOJ could bring federal charges based on their investigations.
I know you cannot give us specifics about the investigation, even if you are aware of them. But we also know that Franklin County deputies do not wear body cameras. Mm-hmm. There were U.S. Marshals, part of this task force, that were in the neighborhood. Mm-hmm. Did anyone have a camera on? Were there any cruisers that were pointed that direction? Can you tell us if there is any video evidence at all that they're going to be culling through as they continue this investigation?
Not that I'm aware of as I sit here this evening. As you know, body-worn cameras were my top priority when I was running for mayor, and one of our chief accomplishments in my first term, and this year decided that we were even going to expand the use of body-worn cameras to our SWAT officers. So I'm a huge believer in body-worn cameras, transparency and accountability for folks on both sides of the camera, but not having body-worn camera footage in this situation is very, very challenging. But I applaud the sheriff and the county commissioners just announced yesterday that they're moving forward expeditiously with a plan to make sure that their deputies have body-worn cameras in the future.
Mayor Ginther, we are going to wrap up here in just a moment, but before we let you go, I just need you to take a moment to speak to people at home. We have communities that are broken, and within Columbus as one community, there are multiple communities here Talk to people about how do we move forward with this situation that's taken place in our community.
And the hashtag has hit us right here in Central
Yeah,
Ohio.
we talk about this with communities throughout the country. Folks, as they say, are sick and tired of being sick and tired. I can't tell you how many people this week have reached out to me and said, Carrie, reach out to our elected leaders. We need a panel. We need a panel discussion. And we've been having this conversation for months now, just about, and I know this is not your agency, but this is in your city. We've been having the conversation for months and years now about how we move forward. And so my response to them is, do we want to hear more of this? Some people say it's lip service. How can you assure people in Central Ohio that there is a sense of effort, that this is on your heart, and that we can work to heal, to move forward through a situation like this?
The safety of everyone in our community is my top priority. And as a dad, I am grieving with Mrs. Payne and the Goodson family, the loss of their child, their sibling, their family member. He's never coming home to that place at dinner tonight, tomorrow, the months and years ahead. And we as a community have to decide what type of future we're going to build. Are we going to build a future where everyone in this community is safe, that trust and confidence in law enforcement matches our compassion and commitment for our neighbors? Are we willing to make tough decisions to make sure that people of color, and particularly African Americans, who have seen an overwhelming amount of violence at the hands of law enforcement, not just in this community but around the country, and make that a priority, acknowledge that it exists, and own the remedy to change it? That's what I believe this city and this community is uniquely positioned to do. But we have to grieve this loss. This is not just Mrs. Payne's son. This is a son of Columbus. And we have lost a beautiful life that had so much yet to live.
Mayor Andrew Ginther, thank you so much for spending some time, so much of your time with us here at NBC4 on a Friday evening. We appreciate you stopping by and answering questions from all three of the anchors here. We appreciate it.